everyone, today I'm going to share about being a Christian in the workplace. I think this topic has been coming up quite a fair bit amongst my friends, and we've been having lots of extensive discussions about culture and fitting to culture and how certain expectations, so-called expectations of the workplace, do not quite gel well with our beliefs and what God has commanded us to do. I feel this is a topic that comes up a lot whenever I go for law Christian fellowships or Christian discussions. Essentially the concern or the assumption here is always that it's very hard to be a Christian at the workplace, that to be a Christian you will definitely have to struggle here and there and not fit in so well and basically kind of have to resist peer pressure. I feel that these concerns are true, but at the same time I also feel that they are pretty manageable. Praise the Lord. I think I've been quite blessed with a workplace where I feel that all this so-called peer pressure is very manageable. I feel like following Christ just has these two contrasting concepts. One is the cost of following Christ, which is bearing the cross every day, and second, it is the idea of feeling very assured, like blessed assurance, right? That's why there's this song called Blessed Assurance, and I honestly now feel that following Christ is more of a greater assurance than a cost. And I will elaborate on why I feel so. So if you're wondering, is peer pressure real? I think it is. And peer pressure to me, so far, in my experience, has come in the form of drinking. That's one area of work that I feel sometimes can contradict what I believe. I think all of us have different convictions. Like some people feel that, okay, I will not take a sip at all, even if it's a team situation or even if it's a client lunch or client dinner. To stay away from even the possibility of getting drunk, I will not take a sip at all. Some people think that it's okay, I can drink a few sips or have a glass or two as long as I don't get drunk. And then on the other extreme, there will be people who feel that, no, I need to fit into the culture, and if my culture requires me, or if my bosses expect me to drink, then I need to drink because I cannot so-called don't give my boss face. I think the first two that I mentioned are closer to what the Bible encourages us to do, which is to ensure that you do not fall into drunkenness. And in that light, I think ultimately you have to ask yourself, is drinking compulsory as part of your job scope? Is it part of your JD? Like when you sign up for the job, as part of a job description, does it say you need to drink? I'm sure most jobs do not require us to drink as part of our job scope. And drinking is more of a kind of a leisure activity for us to either please the clients or for us to kind of please the bosses. And in my own experience, I think, yeah, there is some form of drinking culture at work. It's not a very strong culture. It's not like, in my team at least, it's not that people drink till they get drunk, but they do enjoy a couple of drinks like during team dinners or during celebrations. And also, even as my colleagues gather, they do like to hang out for drinks. And where I stand at this point in time is that whenever my colleagues are out for drinks, just colleagues, like as a informal social gathering, I will definitely not join. Like regardless of whether I'm free or not free, my straight answer is that no, I will not be participating or I will not join them for the activity, including the activity that comes before the drinking. And for team dinners, what I do is that I do take a sip or two, or a glass or two, but all within manageable limits. Essentially, I make sure that I do not get drunk. I used to be a lot more conservative for reasons that are not exactly my own. But when I was training, I literally did not take a sip of alcohol or even at team dinners. And I felt that the situation made things a little awkward at times and was also not exactly strictly my conviction, because my conviction and where I stand is that it's okay to have a drink or two during team events as long as I don't get drunk and I make sure that I am still not tipsy. Like I wouldn't end up spouting nonsense or laughing excessively or being too kind of loose in that sense. I make sure that whatever amounts I drink is just an amount that allows me to kind of enjoy the drink, enjoy the company, enjoy the conversation, but not to a point where I feel light and loose. Why I don't join my colleagues for drinks is because I actually did join them once before. It wasn't an official drinking event, it was more of like a gathering at one of my colleagues' house. We started off with dinner, people bought drinks, then people started drinking, and then people were hanging out till very late. Basically the whole gathering ended at about 3 AM. I had to take a cab home, spend an excessive amount of money on late night cab fare, and basically I felt that I was doing damage to my body because I was not sleeping at the right time. I was coming home at 3-4 AM. I was wasting money unnecessarily. And just thinking about this whole situation, then I realized that if I had followed my own convictions, I would have been at a much better place. Like I asked myself, in future, if there was such an opportunity and if I had known that the event would turn up like that, and basically if the same things were to happen again, would I have chosen to go for the event? And my answer to myself was no, because I don't think this is the way God wants me to treat my body, and I don't think this lifestyle is healthy. And honestly, to me, it felt like it wasn't that fun also because it wasn't healthy. I decided to go at that point in time because I felt that it was nice to at least build some rapport with my colleagues and also not always turn them down whenever they invite me for outings or gatherings. Essentially, I didn't feel like it would be nice and polite to always be an outcast and to always reject people's invitation especially when they are sincere and they sincerely want to know more about you and to know you better. Yeah, but after that event, I told myself that I would not agree to go for such an activity anymore because I didn't exactly feel comfortable with it, and I didn't feel that the event was a healthy one. Then the question comes, does it mean that you cannot be a normal person if you're a Christian? I feel that, well, there are a lot of other opportunities to gather with your colleagues and show love and concern, while at the same time being the salt and light for God. I will still try and hang out with my colleagues during lunch or during office hours when we're in the office. I can interact with them still, and because those environments are kind of more controlled and more manageable, like lunch break is only 1 hour and you can't end up having a drink, or you can't end your lunch at 3 a.m. So I will choose the correct circumstances, and the circumstances where I feel that our gathering will be healthy. Honestly, I also feel like I've reached a point where I no longer feel so strong about peer pressure. Like I can make my own choices, even if it's not what the majority chooses. Like even if the majority of the people are attending a gathering and I'm not, I don't feel so uncomfortable doing that. What is the problem with choosing something that I'm comfortable with? It's essentially the fear of judgment, right? Like fearing that, oh, my colleagues will judge me and think that I'm someone who's antisocial, or fearing that I may not progress that much well in work, or my boss will not be so happy with me because I don't get along well with my colleagues, or that I'm just not a good sport when it comes to drinking. And yeah, so I think all this fear in the end to me was like, you know, God said to fear no man and just to only fear him. The truth is that I really need not fear such judgment. Like as much as my colleagues want to judge me and think that I'm antisocial, or my bosses may not be pleased with me if I don't drink or don't get along with my colleagues, to me, I will treat it as a situation that is out of my control and in God's control. Yeah. And what was in my control was that I do my work well, I do my work diligently, and make sure that, yeah, like everything that is within my JD, my job description, I do it well, because that is what I'm employed and hired to do. So if my boss were to fault me one day and decide that, oh, I'm not a good worker because I just don't drink, I'm not so sociable, then it's fine because I did my best. I did what I feel was necessary and important for this job that I signed up for. Whereas all these other extra activities are, to me, a so-called bonus, like that I am not required to fulfill. And that was how I came to be at peace with this situation, and that accepting the fact that I will never be as close with my colleagues as all my other colleagues are with each other or one another, because they do hang out more frequently and do gather more frequently. But I'm accepting and willing to accept the consequences of my choices, and I'm okay with the fact that I won't be as close to them, and that I will be missing out on certain activities, or that maybe my boss will feel that I'm not so sociable. Just knowing that as long as my actions are pleasing to God and do not contradict my convictions, I feel so much more at peace. In fact, when I was thinking about the challenges of following Christ in the workplace, I found that I came to the opposite conclusion. Following Christ is such a blessed assurance. Like, it is really such a blessed assurance. And if you follow him, the yoke is easy and the burden is light. Because essentially you don't have to care about what people think about you anymore. What matters most is what God thinks about you, and whether what you have done is pleasing to him, and not about whether your bosses are happy with you or your colleagues are happy with you. It's that all these things can just fall away because it's not so important. Like if you set your hearts and your minds on the heavenly things, then all these earthly so-called expectations and judgments just don't really matter anymore. Yeah, I know it sounds very extreme, and it sounds like, are you sure you really don't care? My answer to that will be that it requires practice. It requires believing and trusting that whatever God says in the Bible is true and a certainty. So I think initially, like the more I practice telling myself the truth, which is that I should not fear anyone but God. Like fear no man and only fear God, and that God is a provider. So the more I tell myself all these truths, the more I internalize all of them, and the more I realize that I'm free from the chains and burdens of the expectations of people or the expectations of my bosses, or yeah, it's like I feel so much lighter. Like I can just focus on doing my work and doing my work diligently, like how a good worker would do, as they do unto the Lord. And because I'm just focused on doing my work, I feel that I am rarely even stressed about, oh, whether I can get a promotion or not, whether my boss likes me, whether my colleagues like me, whether they think that I'm antisocial. It's like all these thoughts don't even invade my mind anymore, because I just feel so assured that God has all this in control, and that as long as I live my life trying to please him and trying to be the salt and light, that he will take care of all these other aspects. Having said that, I don't mean that it's super easy to overcome all this need to succumb to peer pressure and this pressure to conform to what your bosses expect and what your colleagues expect. I don't mean that it's easy, but I hope that my sharing encourages you to realize that God will give you strength and will protect you if you're trying to do something that's pleasing to him. You can see how God has worked in my situation. Like, even despite my so-called antisocial behavior, like my boss has nothing against me whatsoever for not drinking. Like, And in fact, they can't, like, legally speaking, they cannot have something against you for not doing all these things because it is not within the job description. It's just essentially an extra thing that you feel pressured to do, to conform to not be a spoil sport. Based on my own experience so far, I feel that I'm able to assert my own stand and even turn down a drink directly from my boss without having to explain further as to why I'm doing this or whatnot. So yeah, I think in that sense, God has definitely covered this area for me. Like, my personal opinion is that if a job really requires you to go against your personal beliefs and your convictions, then it's good to reconsider whether this job is in the first place suitable for you. Because why would you want to do a job that makes you feel so uncomfortable? Like, if you can't exactly fully be yourself and live out your beliefs or live out whatever your convictions are, then it could be a sign that the place where you're working at is just not conducive for your growth and not suitable for you. Considering that this weekend was just a long weekend because of Good Friday and then there's Easter and also had Bible study, I was just reflecting on the value of what God has done for us on the cross and that He has just been through so much suffering for us. Recently, I was just finishing up on Matthew. I was just reading the part where Judas betrayed Jesus and the day after Jesus had to carry his cross and eventually get crucified on the cross, even though he was blameless, and just the weight of him sacrificing his life and just going through all the pain and suffering for us. I feel like sometimes as we work and we go about our daily lives, we do forget and how much God actually loves us, that He was willing to put Himself through all that suffering. If we truly understand the value of what God has done for us in our lives and how much He has sacrificed, that He was willing to send His one and only Son to die for us on the cross, even though He was blameless, it makes me consider whether have I been living my life for Christ, or have I been living my life focusing and considering about all these other earthly things that are temporal and essentially losing sight of the big picture, losing sight of God's kingdom. I hope my sharing here encourages you to stay on this race for Christ and keep putting God first, because where you put God first, I believe that God protects and God acknowledges your efforts. I will quote one of my latest favorite verses from Matthew, which is Matthew chapter 28 verse 20, but I'll read a bit more from in front. It says, "Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I've commanded you." And this is my favorite line. "And surely I am with you always to the very end of the age." To me, it's just very assuring that God has promised that He will always be with us always, regardless of the situation. So where you choose to honor Him, I believe that God will honor you as well. Yeah, and I hope that this encourages you to continue in your faith and to be the salt and light in your workplace. That's all. Bye.